We've all been there. You find yourself in the middle of an argument, and halfway through, a little voice inside your head whispers, "Why am I even doing this? This is going nowhere." That's not just frustration. It's your intuition telling you something very important. Not every argument is worth your time. Here's the truth. Arguing with some people is like wrestling with a pig. You both get dirty, but the pig likes it. Some people are not engaging in good faith. They don't want truth, they don't want clarity, and they definitely don't want resolution. What they want is to win, to dominate, or to make noise. So how do you know when you're dealing with that kind of person? How do you recognize when you're not having a debate with a rational human being, but you're stuck in a loop with someone who is, quite frankly, too stubborn, too arrogant, or too closed-minded to even bother? Today, we're going to talk about 6 very real, very clear signs that you're arguing with a stupid person. And once you recognize these signs, you'll understand why the smartest move is not to win the argument, it's to stop having it. Sign 1. They refuse to listen. They just wait to reply. One of the clearest signs that you're arguing with a stupid person is this. They don't actually listen. They're not present with you in the conversation. They're not trying to understand your point. Instead, they're just waiting for you to stop talking so they can jump in and fire off their next line. And let me be really clear. Listening is not the same as waiting. Listening is active. It requires curiosity. It requires humility. It requires a willingness to sit with someone else's perspective, even if it's uncomfortable. But when you're dealing with a stupid person, that humility is missing. That curiosity is absent. What you get instead is a wall of defensiveness. Think about the way it feels. You're explaining something important to you. Maybe it's a concern. Maybe it's an idea. Maybe it's just your side of the story. And before you even finish your thought, they cut you off with a, "Yeah, but," or "That's not true," or "Well, actually." And you feel it, don't you? That little sting of disrespect, that little voice inside you that says, "Wow, they didn't hear a single word I just said." What's really happening in that moment is they're not listening to understand. They're listening to reload. They're not engaging with your point. They're preparing their counterattack. Psychologists call this reactive listening. Reactive listening means the person is not absorbing your words. They're scanning for ammunition. They're picking out little fragments of what you say, twisting them, and getting ready to throw them back. And here's the dangerous part. When someone listens only to reply, they're not engaging with you as a person. They're engaging with you as an opponent. You've become the enemy. They need to defeat instead of the human being they need to understand. That shift, seeing you as an opponent instead of a partner in dialogue, is exactly what makes these arguments go nowhere. Because the moment curiosity disappears, so does the chance of resolution. Let me give you a real-world example. Imagine 2 friends planning a trip. One says, "I think we should take the train instead of flying. It might take longer, but it'll be cheaper and more scenic." A wise person would respond with, "That's interesting. Tell me more. Why do you think it's a better option?" But a stupid person, they'll jump in with, "That's ridiculous. No one takes trains anymore. Do you even know how much hassle that is?" Notice the difference? The wise person leans into curiosity. The stupid person leans into dismissal. And here's something I've learned. When people refuse to listen, what they're really saying is, "I already have the truth. There's nothing you can add to my understanding." But here's the irony. That certainty, that absolute refusal to even consider another perspective isn't a sign of strength. It's a sign of weakness, because confidence without openness is not wisdom. It's arrogance, and arrogance shuts the door on growth every single time. Here's the bigger problem. When someone refuses to listen, they're not just shutting down your words, they're shutting down connection. And connection, whether it's in relationships and work or even in debates, is the foundation of trust. Think about your own life. Have you ever had a conversation where you felt deeply heard? Where the other person didn't interrupt, didn't try to fix, didn't rush to reply, but just sat with your words? You walk away from those conversations feeling lighter, stronger, validated. You walk away thinking, "Oh, wow, they really care about me." Now compare that to an argument where every word you say bounces off like it never existed. You walk away drained, frustrated, even questioning yourself. That's the cost of dealing with someone who refuses to listen. So here's the truth. The first sign you're arguing with a stupid person isn't in their insults or even in their volume. It's in their posture. Do they lean in to hear you, or do they lean forward waiting to attack? Because smart people, wise people, courageous people, they know listening doesn't make you weak. Listening makes you strong. But stupid people, they mistake silence for defeat and listening for surrender. And that's why you can't win with them, because they're not here to listen. They're here to fight. Sign 2. They attack you, not the argument. Another clear sign that you're arguing with a stupid person is that instead of debating the issue, they go after you. Smart people argue about ideas. Stupid people argue about people. They don't say, I think your point about budgeting could be improved if we looked at the numbers. Instead, they say things like, you're too sensitive. You wouldn't understand the reacting. Notice the shift? It's not about the topic anymore. It's about your character, your intelligence, your worth. That kind of move has a name. It's called an ad hominem attack, a Latin phrase meaning to the person. It's one of the oldest tricks in the book, and it's always a red flag. Because when someone can't challenge the logic, they challenge the person. And here's the heartbreaking part. When this happens, it's not just about the argument, it's about dignity. Because when someone turns the spotlight from the issue onto you, what they're really saying is, I can't win with facts, so I'll try to disarm you with shame. And shame is powerful, isn't it? It makes us second guess ourselves. It makes us wonder, am I really being too emotional? Am I overreacting? Instead of holding our ground, we start defending ourselves as a person, not our point as an idea. And once that happens, the argument is already lost. Let me share a story. A woman I know, let's call her Sarah, once told me about an argument she had with a colleague. They were discussing a project timeline. Sarah calmly pointed out that the deadlines were unrealistic. Instead of engaging with her logic, the colleague smirked and said, you always complain. You're just negative. Do you see what happened there? The debate wasn't about the timeline anymore. It wasn't about the project, it became about Sarah's personality. He shifted the spotlight so he didn't have to defend his plan. Sarah told me she walked away not just frustrated, but doubting herself. That's what ad hominem attacks do. They don't just derail the argument, they plant seeds of self-doubt. Now, here's something important to remember. When people attack you instead of your idea, it's not a reflection of your weakness. It's a reflection of theirs. Because here's the truth, intelligent people want their ideas to be tested. They want the debate, the sharpening, the back and forth. Why? Because they know their worth isn't on trial. Only the idea is, but a stupid person, their ego is so fragile that they cannot separate their identity from the issue. So instead of saying, let's test the idea, they say, let's tear you down so your idea collapses with you. That's not argument. That's insecurity masquerading as strength. Think about politics or even heated family debates at the dinner table. How often do you hear people say, it's dumb, or you're brainwashed, instead of, let's unpack that idea? Why do you believe it? The first approach is about domination. The second approach is about understanding. And that's the difference between arguing with someone wise versus someone foolish. Wise people challenge your thoughts. Stupid people challenge your worth. Here's the bigger lesson. When someone attacks you personally in an argument, you have a choice. You can get defensive, fight back, sling an insult, raise the volume, or you can pause and see it for what it is, a diversion, a tactic, a desperate attempt to win without actually engaging. And when you recognize it, you suddenly realize, this isn't a real conversation. This is a game I don't have to play. So the second sign is clear. When you notice the argument drifting away from the issue and straight into an attack on your character, intelligence, or emotions, you're not in a debate anymore. You're in a boxing ring with someone who's too insecure to fight fair. And the only way to win a fight like that is to not step into the ring. Sign 3, they can't handle being wrong. Here's another sign that you're arguing with a stupid person. They absolutely cannot admit when they're wrong. It doesn't matter how much evidence you bring. It doesn't matter if you show them the facts, the receipts, or the plain truth right in front of their face. They will twist, dodge, or outright deny it. Because for them, being wrong feels like death. And let's pause on that for a second. Why does admitting you're wrong feel so threatening to some people? Psychologists say it has to do with ego fragility. A fragile ego can't handle cracks. It can't handle the possibility that its worldview is incomplete. So instead of saying, I didn't know that, or mistake, the fragile ego doubles down. It denies, it attacks, it refuses to bend, even when bending is the only sane thing to do. Think about the last time you argued with someone like this. You laid out the facts. You explained patiently. You even provided proof. And instead of saying, okay, fair point, they shifted the goalposts, they brought up a different issue, or they flat out said, that's not true, even though it was right there in front of them, you walk away stunned. Not because they disagreed, but because they seemed incapable of saying 3 simple words. I was wrong. Here's the difference between wisdom and stupidity. Smart people don't see being wrong as failure. They see it as learning. Foolish people see being wrong as humiliation. The wisest leaders in history, scientists, philosophers, innovators, they all admitted when they were wrong. They saw correction as a path forward, not a step backward. But when you're dealing with a stupid person, humility is missing. They think admitting a mistake destroys their credibility. The irony is, it's the refusal to admit mistakes that destroys credibility in the first place. Let me tell you a story. Years ago, I watched 2 managers at a company argue about a budget decision. One manager presented clear evidence. The data showed that the plan wasn't working and adjustments were needed. The other manager refused to accept it. He slammed his fist on the table and said, I don't care what your numbers say. I know I'm right. And in that moment, everyone in the room realized something important. The argument was over. Not because the data had failed, but because the man's ego had taken over. From that day forward, people stopped bringing him problems. They stopped trusting him with solutions. Why? Because no one wants to work with someone who is allergic to being wrong. Here's what's really happening beneath the surface. When someone can't admit they're wrong, they are confusing being wrong with being unworthy. They think, if I was wrong, then I must be stupid. If I was wrong, then I must be incompetent. If I was wrong, then I must lose. But here's the truth. Being wrong is not a reflection of your worth. It's a reflection of your humanity. Every single one of us has been wrong. Every single one of us will be wrong again. The question is, do we have the courage to admit it? Stupid people don't. And that's why arguments with them go in circles. You'll never get to resolution because resolution requires humility. And I'll say this, there is no progress without the words wrong. In marriages, friendships, work relationships, those 3 words are the bridge that keeps connection alive. Without them, you're not building bridges, you're building walls. So when you're in an argument and you notice that the other person cannot say those words, no matter how obvious the truth is, pay attention, because that's not strength. That's fragility. That's fear. And the sad truth is you can't reason with someone whose ego is more important than the truth. Sign 4, they twist your words. Another unmistakable sign that you're arguing with a stupid person is this. They don't argue with what you actually said. They argue with a distorted version of it. You'll say something clear, reasonable, maybe even gentle. And before you know it, they've twisted your words into something completely different, usually something extreme or offensive, so they can attack it more easily. This is called a straw man argument. And let me tell you, it's one of the laziest, most dishonest tactics in any conversation. Here's how it works. You say, I think this plan could be more efficient. They reply, oh, so you're saying my plan is terrible and I don't know what I'm doing? No, that's not what you said. Not even close. Or you say, I don't think we should spend that much right now. And they snap back. Oh, so you don't care about investing in the future? Again, not what you said. But do you see what they're doing? They take your words, exaggerate them, twist them, strip them of nuance, and then throw them back in your face like a weapon. And let's be real, this isn't just frustrating, it's exhausting. Because instead of moving forward in the discussion, you're stuck backtracking, clarifying, saying things like, that's not what I meant, over and over again. It feels like being lost in a hall of mirrors. No matter how carefully you explain yourself, your words come back distorted. And the more you try to untangle the mess, the more they twist it again That's not dialogue. That's manipulation. Here's why this happens. Stupid people twist your words because it's easier to attack a distorted version of your argument than the actual one. If they engaged with your real point, they'd have to think critically. They'd have to consider nuance, and nuance takes effort. But if they turn your argument into something extreme, something black and white, something caricatured, it becomes easier to win. It's like fighting a scarecrow instead of a living person. They'd rather knock down the straw man than face the complexity of what you're really saying. Let me share a story. A man I coached once told me about a fight he had with his partner. He said to her, "I wish we had more time together during the week. I miss you." It was a vulnerable, honest statement. But instead of hearing the love behind his words, she snapped back with, "So you're saying I'm a bad partner? That I don't care about us?" He expressed a need. She twisted it into an accusation. The conversation derailed instantly. Instead of talking about connection, they were stuck defending and attacking. This is what twisting words does. It moves the conversation from problem solving to personal battle. And here's the thing. Smart people don't need to twist your words because they have the courage to engage with them directly. They'll say, "Okay, I hear you. You think the plan could be more efficient. Tell me why." Or "Worried about our spending. What's behind that?" That's what real dialogue sounds like. But stupid people, they twist, distort, and exaggerate because facing the truth feels too heavy. And I want you to hear this clearly. When someone constantly twists your words, it's not just disrespect, it's control. Because twisting your words is a way of controlling the narrative. It puts you on the defensive. It forces you to fight battles you never agreed to fight. It drains your energy and steals your clarity. And here's the most important part. It prevents resolution. Because how can you resolve something when you're not even arguing about the same thing? So pay attention. If you notice that every time you speak, your words come back to you distorted, exaggerated, or completely stripped of their original meaning, you're not in a healthy debate. You're in a trap. And the smartest thing you can do is step out of it. Because the truth is, you can spend hours defending what you didn't say, or you can walk away knowing that someone who refuses to hear your real words isn't worth the conversation in the first place. They care more about winning than understanding. One of the most exhausting signs that you're arguing with a stupid person is this. Their only goal is to win. They're not here for understanding. They're not here for resolution. They're not here for growth. They are here to dominate, to come out on top, to score points like the argument is some kind of sport. And that's the difference between a wise person and a foolish one. A wise person enters a debate with curiosity. They want to understand, to clarify, to maybe even shift their perspective. But a stupid person, they enter the debate with one question in mind. How do I make sure I don't lose? Here's how you know you're dealing with someone like this. They raise their voice, thinking volume equals victory. They interrupt constantly as if silencing you proves their strength. They'll make outrageous claims with no evidence, daring you to waste time disproving them. And if they sense they're losing ground, they'll change the subject completely just to stay in control. It's not about the truth, it's about the trophy. And they'll sacrifice logic, respect, and even relationships just to hold that imaginary prize in their hand. Let me give you an example. Imagine two people arguing about politics at the dinner table. One calmly says, "I think this policy could help working families." Now, if the other person is wise, they'll respond with, "Interesting. Why do you think that? What evidence have you seen?" That's a conversation. But if the other person is foolish, they'll slam the table, raise their voice, and say, "That's stupid. That'll never work." You don't know what you're talking about. Notice what happened. They didn't lean into curiosity. They lunged for dominance. Their words weren't about the policy. Their words were about winning the moment. And here's the dangerous part. When someone cares more about winning than understanding, the argument will never end. Because think about it, understanding has a finish line. If I truly want to understand you, once I do, we can move forward. We can agree, disagree, or compromise. But winning never ends, because if I win today, tomorrow I need to win again. Winning is not a resolution, it's a cycle. That's why arguments with stupid people feel endless. They're not running the race for clarity, they're running it for ego, and ego has no finish line. Here's something research tells us in healthy relationships, whether romantic, family, or workplace, the goal of conflict is repair, not victory. Conflict is supposed to help us see each other better, not bury each other under the weight of pride. But when you're with someone who only wants to win, repair is impossible. They will bulldoze over your feelings, dismiss your logic, and push you into silence just so they can stand tall. And here's the tragic irony. They think winning makes them strong. But in reality, it exposes just how weak they are, because people who are truly strong don't need to win every battle. They just need to understand and be understood. I'll never forget something a mentor once told me. Do you want to be right, or do you want to be effective? That question hit me hard, because sometimes being a right in an argument actually destroys the connection that matters most. But when someone only wants to win, they can't see that bigger picture. They'll choose being a right, even if it means being alone. So here's the truth. When you realize the person across from you doesn't care about understanding you, only about defeating you, that's your cue. That's the moment you recognize the futility of the fight. Because no matter what you say, no matter how good your points are, you're not debating an equal. You're feeding someone's ego. And let me tell you, an ego will eat forever if you let it. Sign 6. They bring emotion without logic. The final sign that you're arguing with a stupid person is this. Their argument is all heat, no light. All emotion, no logic. And let me be clear, emotion itself is not the problem. Emotion is powerful. Emotion is human. Some of the most meaningful conversations we'll ever have are filled with tears, passion, even raised voices. Emotion can deepen connection. But when someone argues only with emotion, rage, sarcasm, ridicule, insults, and never balances it with logic, facts, or reasoning, you're not in a debate anymore. You're in a shouting contest. And shouting contests never lead to truth. Think about it. You raise a thoughtful point, and instead of responding with evidence, they roll their eyes, laugh at you, or throw an insult like, "That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard." You ask for clarification, and instead of answering, they get louder, more dramatic, maybe even mocking you. What they're really saying is, I don't have facts, so I'll use force. I don't have clarity, so I'll use chaos. That's not persuasion. That's intimidation. Here's the thing, emotional intensity can feel convincing in the moment. A red face, a raised voice, a cutting remark, it can shake you. It can make you question yourself. But when the dust settles, you realize something important. Noise doesn't equal truth, because if volume made someone right, toddlers would rule the world. Let me share a story. A friend of mine once told me about an argument she had with her brother about finances. She brought spreadsheets, numbers, a clear plan. He brought anger. He raised his voice, called her controlling, accused her of trying to run his life. At the end of the day, she realized she couldn't win, not because her points weren't solid, but because logic wasn't the language he was speaking. He wasn't arguing from reason. He was arguing from ego and raw emotion. And that's the trap. If you try to meet their emotion with more emotion, the fire just grows. The louder they get, the louder you'll get. Until suddenly you're both shouting, but no one is listening. And here's the deeper truth. Wisdom isn't about removing emotion. It's about integrating it. A wise person says, I feel strongly about this, and here's why. Here's the reasoning. Here's the evidence. That's emotion plus logic. A foolish person says, I feel strongly, therefore I must be right. That's emotion without logic. And when emotion has no anchor in reason, it becomes chaos. Psychologists call this emotional reasoning, the belief that because I feel something strongly, it must be true. I feel disrespected, therefore you must have disrespected me. Well, I feel attacked, therefore you must have attacked me. I feel right, therefore I am right. But feelings are not facts. Feelings are data. They tell us what's going on inside, but they don't always reflect what's going on outside. When someone can't separate the two, conversations become impossible. Because how do you debate with feelings presented as facts? You can't. So here's the sign. If you're in an argument and the other person is pouring out endless emotion, anger, sarcasm, ridicule, but cannot provide a single logical thread to hold it together, you're not having a real conversation. You're standing in a storm, hoping it will pass. And storms don't respond to reason, they burn themselves out. The wisest thing you can do in that moment is step back, because if you stay, you'll get swept into the chaos and soon you'll be shouting too. But if you walk away, you reclaim your power. You remind yourself that truth doesn't need to scream to be heard. So the sixth and final sign is this: when emotion overwhelms logic, when heat replaces light, when passion is used as a substitute for proof, you're not in a debate with a wise person. You're trapped in the noise of a foolish one. And the smartest thing you can do is refuse to mistake their volume for validity. So here's what we've uncovered. When you're arguing with a stupid person, the signs are clear. They don't listen. They attack you instead of the argument. They can't admit when they're wrong. They twist your words. They care more about winning than understanding. And they bring emotion without logic. And here's the truth I want you to carry with you. You don't have to stay in those arguments. You don't have to keep pouring your energy into conversations that only leave you drained, disrespected, and unheard. Because some arguments are not about truth. They're about ego. And you will never win against someone whose ego is louder than their reason. Walking away doesn't mean you're weak. Walking away doesn't mean you lost. Walking away means you are wise enough to see that your time, your peace, and your dignity matter more than proving a point to someone who doesn't care about the truth. And maybe that's the bigger lesson here. The smartest person in the room isn't the one who speaks the loudest, interrupts the most, or dominates the conversation. The smartest person in the room is the one who knows when silence is stronger than words. So the next time you catch yourself stuck in an endless loop with someone who refuses to listen, who twists your words, who only wants to win, remember this: the victory isn't in convincing them. The victory is in conserving your peace. Because at the end of the day, not every battle deserves your presence. And sometimes the wisest, bravest thing you can do is to walk away.